The courtroom went dead silent. Judge Patricia Moreno leaned forward, staring hard at the bank's attorney across the bench. Her voice was calm, but it cut through the air like steel. "Mr. Caldwell, are you telling this court that your client cannot explain where an $81,000 debt came from when the original loan was $14,500? The attorney froze. His mouth opened, but no words came out. Behind him, the regional bank manager, Derek Langford, shifted in his seat. His face had gone pale. Sitting alone at the plaintiff's table was a 71-year-old man named Tom Ashford. He wore a flannel shirt that had seen better days, work boots still caked with dried mud, and a faded cap resting on the table beside him. He didn't look like someone who could take down a bank, but in his weathered hands he held a single piece of paper, a receipt, dated June 14, 2006, and on that receipt was a $52 discrepancy that was about to unravel everything. It all started 6 weeks. Earlier, Tom Ashford had lived his entire life on a 38-acre farm just outside Iron County, Ohio. The land had been in his family for 3 generations. His father had worked that soil, his grandfather before him. And when Tom's wife, Linda, passed away 4 years ago, he made her a promise at her graveside. "I won't let them take this place, not while I'm still breathing." But keeping that promise had become harder every year. Tom was old. His knees didn't work like they used to. His back ached every morning. The farm produced just enough to get by, but barely. He grew soybeans, kept a small vegetable garden, and did odd repair jobs around the county to make ends meet. Years ago, when Linda got sick, Tom had taken out a small loan from Mercantile Trust Bank to cover her medical bills. The original loan was $14,500. He remembered the number clearly, because he'd signed the papers in the same office where he'd opened his first savings account 40 years earlier. The loan officer back then, a man named Jim Feldman, had assured him it was a simple 5-year term with manageable interest. Tom had nodded, shaken his hand, and walked out. That was in 2006. Now, it was 2024, and somehow that $14,500 loan had grown into an $81,000 debt. One cold Tuesday morning in early March, Tom was fixing a fence post near the road when he saw the mail truck. "Pull up." The driver handed him a single envelope. It was from Mercantile Trust Bank. Tom's stomach dropped the moment he saw the return address. He opened it right there, standing in the wind. The letter was short. Final notice of default outstanding balance. $81,274.16 payment. Due April 10, 2024. Failure to pay will result in foreclosure proceedings and seizure of property located at 4293 County Road 58, Iron County, Ohio. Tom read it 3 times. His hands started shaking. He walked back to the house, sat down at the kitchen table, and stared at the letter for over an hour. $81,000. He didn't have $81,000. He didn't even have $8,000. 2 days later, Tom drove his old Ford pickup into town. The engine sputtered the whole way, and the heater barely worked. He parked in front of Mercantile Trust Bank, took a deep breath, and walked inside. The lobby was clean, modern, and cold. A young woman at the front desk smiled politely and asked how she could help. "I need to speak with someone about my loan," Tom said quietly. She typed something into her computer, then looked up. "You'll want to speak with Mr. Langford. He's our branch manager. Let me see if he's available." A few minutes later, Tom was sitting across from Derek Langford in a glass-walled office. Langford was in his mid-40s, sharply dressed with slicked-back hair and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He barely looked at Tom as he pulled up the account on his screen. "Mr. Ashford?" "Yes. I see here you're currently in default on a commercial agricultural loan taken out in 2006. "I know," Tom said, "but I don't understand how it got so high. The original loan was $14,500. Langford tapped his screen a few times. "Well, Mr. Ashford, loans accrue interest. There were also late fees, penalties for missed payments, administrative costs, and compounding interest over 18 years. "I made payments," Tom said firmly. "I never missed a single one for the first 10 years. Langford's smile thinned. "Our system shows multiple missed payments starting in 2012. After your wife passed, I believe. Tom felt his chest tighten. I made those payments. I have receipts. Langford folded his hands on the desk. Mr. Ashford, I'm sure this is difficult, but the bank's records are clear. You owe $85.24. If you can't pay by April 10th, we'll have no choice but to begin foreclosure. Tom sat there for a long moment. Then he stood up, put his hat back on, and walked out without another word. That night, Tom sat alone in his kitchen. The house was quiet except for the hum of the old refrigerator. He thought about Linda. He thought about his father. He thought about the promise he'd made. Then he stood up, grabbed a flashlight, and walked out to the barn. The barn was cluttered with decades of tools, boxes, and forgotten junk. Tom climbed up into the loft, where he kept old files in a dented metal cabinet. He pulled it open and started going through everything. Tax records, vet bills, seed receipts, equipment warranties, and then, at the bottom of the second drawer, he found it, a thick yellow envelope. Inside were payment receipts, dozens of them, all from Mercantile Trust Bank, all stamped, all signed. Tom spread them out on the workbench under the light. His hands were shaking again, but this time it wasn't from fear. He started adding up the numbers. It took him almost 2 hours, but by the end of it, Tom had gone through every receipt. According to his records, he had paid a total of $18,120 toward the loan between 2006 and 2018. He grabbed a piece of paper and did the math. Original loan, $14,500 payments made, $18,120 even with reasonable interest. The loan should have been paid off years ago, but then he noticed something. One receipt didn't match. It was dated November 12, 2009. The receipt said he'd paid $340, but when he checked his personal checkbook from that same month, the cleared check showed $392, a $52 difference. Tom stared at it. It was small, almost nothing. But it was wrong. And if that payment was wrong, what else was? The next morning, Tom drove to the Iron County Public Library. He asked the librarian if they had any resources on loan disputes or banking errors. She directed him to a community bulletin board. Pinned to it was a flyer. Free legal clinic and Iron County Legal Aid, Tuesdays and Thursdays, 2 to 5 p.m. Tom checked his watch. It was Thursday. Sarah Chen was a 34-year-old attorney who volunteered at the legal clinic twice a week. She'd grown up in a small town herself, went to law school on loans she was still paying off, and believed that people like Tom deserved someone in their corner. When Tom walked in and explained his situation, she listened carefully. Then she asked to see the receipts. She spent 20 minutes reviewing them in silence. Finally, she looked up. Mr. Ashford, do you have any record of what the bank says you owe? Tom pulled out the demand letter. Sarah compared it to the receipts. Her eyes narrowed. There's a major discrepancy here. Either their system is wrong, or someone's been manipulating your account. Can you help me? Tom asked. Sarah looked him in the eye. Yes, but we need to move fast. You've only got 3 weeks. Sarah immediately filed a petition to halt foreclosure with the Iron County Court, citing evidence of accounting errors and demanding a full audit of Tom's loan. The bank pushed back hard. Their attorney, Kenneth Caldwell, argued that Tom was simply a delinquent borrower trying to delay the inevitable, but Judge Moreno granted a temporary stay and ordered both parties to appear in court with full documentation. Sarah didn't stop there. She requested Tom's complete loan file under the Truth in Lending Act and Fair Debt Collection Practices Act. When the file arrived, it was a mess. Payments were listed out of order. Some months showed duplicate entries. Others were missing entirely. But the biggest red flag? Between 2012 and 2015, several of Tom's payments were marked as applied to fees instead of principal. That meant the money he'd paid hadn't reduced his debt. It had just been absorbed into vague charges. Sarah pulled up the original loan agreement. Nowhere in the contract did it authorize the bank to unilaterally reclassify payments. Sarah also tracked down Jim Feldman, the original loan officer. He'd retired 5 years earlier and now lived 2 counties over. When she called him, he remembered Tom immediately. Good man, quiet, paid on time for years. I was surprised when I heard he'd defaulted. He didn't default, Sarah said. Oh, the bank's records don't match his. Feldman went quiet. Then he said something that changed everything. You know, I left that bank because I didn't like what I was seeing. After the 2008 financial crisis, new management came in. They started restructuring loans. Quietly, a lot of farmers got hit. Restructuring how? Fees, penalties, reassigning payments. It was all legal on paper, but it wasn't right. Would you testify? Feldman hesitated. Then, yeah, I would. April 9th, 2024. One day before the foreclosure deadline. The courtroom was packed. On one side sat Derek Langford and Kenneth Caldwell, surrounded by assistants and briefcases. On the other side sat Tom Ashford and Sarah Chen. Judge Moreno entered. Everyone stood. Be seated. Let's begin. Caldwell went first. He painted Tom as a man who'd fallen behind due to tragedy and age, but insisted the numbers were clear. Your Honor, Mr. Ashford owes this bank $81,274. We've provided full documentation. This is a standard foreclosure case. Then Sarah stood. Your Honor, this is not standard. This is systematic fraud. The room stirred. Caldwell shot to his feet. Objection? Judge Moreno raised a hand. I'll allow it. Ms. Chen, you'd better be able to back that up. I can. Your Honor, Sarah walked Tom through his payment history. She showed the court every receipt, every cleared check, every bank stamp. Then she held up the November 2009 receipt. Your Honor, this receipt shows a payment of $340. But Mr. Ashford's bank statement shows $392 was withdrawn. That's a $52 discrepancy. And, Caldwell said dismissively, $50 over 15 years is irrelevant. It's not irrelevant when it's part of a pattern. Sarah shot back. She pulled up a chart. Between 2009 and 2015, we found 9 separate payments where the amount received by the bank didn't match what Mr. Ashford actually paid. The room went silent. In total, the bank undercredited his account by $1,847. Then Sarah moved to the fees. Your Honor, the bank reclassified over $11,000 of Mr. Ashford's payments as administrative fees without his consent and without contractual authority. She showed the original loan document. Nowhere in this contract does it say the bank can reassign payments. Caldwell stood. Those were late fees? Oh, he was never late, Sarah snapped. Not according to his records. And the bank refused to provide time-stamped proof of when payments were received. Judge Moreno leaned forward. Mr. Caldwell, does your client have payment logs with dates and times? Caldwell shuffled his papers. We'll need to retrieve those from archives. You've had 3 weeks, the judge said coldly. Then, Sarah called Jim Feldman to the stand. He testified about the bank's practices after 2008. He confirmed that he'd seen similar cases. And he confirmed that Tom Ashford had been a reliable, trustworthy borrower. By the time he stepped down, the bank's case was falling apart. Sarah stood one last time. Your Honor, when you remove the unauthorized fees, correct the undercredited payments, and apply standard interest, the recalculated total debt is $4,316. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Tom stared at her, eyes wide. Mr. Ashford has already overpaid this loan by more than $3,000. Judge Moreno turned to Caldwell. Counselor? Caldwell looked at Langford. Langford looked at the floor. Your Honor, we'd like to request a recess to review. Denied. Judge Moreno's gavel came down. I'm ruling in favor of the plaintiff. The foreclosure is dismissed. The debt is void, and I'm referring this case to the State Banking Commission for investigation. Tom walked out of the courthouse into the spring air. Sarah walked beside him. You did it, she said. Tom stopped. He looked back at the courthouse, then at her. We did it. The state launched a full investigation into Mercantile Trust Bank, and they found that over 200 farmers and small business owners in rural Ohio had been subject to similar practices. The bank was fined $4 million. Derek Langford was terminated, and Tom Ashford? He went back to his farm. He planted soybeans that spring, and every morning, when he walked out to the fields, he'd stop by Linda's grave and tell her the news. We kept it. Linda, we kept the farm. Tom never wanted to be a hero. He just wanted to keep a promise. But somewhere along the way, he learned something important. The powerful don't always win because they're right. They win because people stop fighting. But when one man Refuses to give up. When he digs through old boxes in a dusty barn, when he finds one, receipt with a $52 mistake, everything can change because the truth doesn't care how much money you have. It doesn't care how big your office is. It just sits there, waiting, and when someone like Tom Ashford finally picks it up, it becomes the most powerful weapon in the world.